Story RH, the podcast that makes a long story short.
Welcome to all.
History is made of stories.
In this episode, we'll be talking about commitment and looking at ways to cultivate it.
Commitment is a complex concept that ties in with other factors like motivation, job satisfaction, and engagement, but studies are conflicting. Some suggest employees are disconnected from their company, others show people are engaged in their work.
All those studies can definitely be disorienting. One thing is certain. A company cannot run smoothly and successfully if everyone isn't on board. But how do you cultivate that commitment? What's the story?
Commitment is crucial to any collective undertaking. Without that commitment, any chance of cooperation will be crippled by the individualism that drives people to put their own interests before the common good.
In other words, the company needs people who are not purely self-serving. People who are there because they're motivated, engaged, and keen to do the job.
Exactly. The emotional attachment you're talking about is like a sense of belonging. It sits on two foundations: a belief in the company's business plan and values on the one hand, and a willingness to contribute on the other.
That leads us to the notion of cooperation, which involves seeing your own actions as contributing to a common goal. Cooperation is impossible without that desire to personally contribute to the common good.
The challenge of commitment and cooperation forces companies to focus on three fronts. First, it's crucial to instill purpose, which means making the business plan the common goal to ensure the company is seen not as a combination of people with separate interests, but as a group of like minds.
It's crucial that everyone get on board with the business plan. But it's also important that people's everyday experiences don't continuously contradict the overall plan and the company's values, which means it's vital to restore consistency between what's said and what's done, between message and action.
You're right, and that's the second point of focus. If the company's business plan is just smoke and mirrors, it will undermine company management, and that will really erode trust. And you can't have cooperation without trust, which is why it's important to stamp out any inconsistencies within the company.
To do that, it's important to be consistent with all company stakeholders. You can't market values to clients if the everyday experience of your employees is a world away from those values. Those inconsistencies lead to real frustration and prevent the company from running smoothly.
The last point depends on how people work together. Cohesion is crucial. People can only achieve the overall goal if they work together, which means, in any sort of group undertaking, you have to take other people's interests into account.
Look at those pay policies that embody the excesses of individualization. In the worst cases, they create real conflict between what people do in the interests of the common good and what they do in their own interests, in a bid to get their bonuses. We've all seen group decisions taken purely for self-serving reasons.
That's why it's vital to prevent those abuses and make sure any recognition policies reconcile individual with collective interests. The goal is to develop a feeling of belonging to a group of like minds. Equity and exemplarity play an important part in that endeavor, but that's a story for another day.
To recap, the company needs people who actively cooperate in the interests of the common good, and that cooperation can only come through an individual commitment on the part of everyone involved, which requires companies to focus on three fronts: purpose, consistency, and cohesion. Is that right?
Exactly right. Way to make a long story short.
Story RH, the podcast that makes a long story short.